Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to look at the world according to the conservative view. There certainly has been enough to talk about lately on both the left and the right's views on what's been happening. So, why don't we start first with introductions? Uncle Ed?
Yes, Ed Bertarelli, town official in Milford, a longtime member of the Milford Republican Town Committee and active for about a number of decades in the state Republican Party. I served as the party treasurer, the interim chairman, and I was a state committee man for 16 years. So I've been involved in aspects from the Republican point of view, at least the Massachusetts Republican point of view.
And Jeff?
Thank you, Al. Jeff Nero, Precinct 8 Town Meeting member, former Finance Committee member. Looking forward to having the discussion. Thank you so much.
Well, guys, where do you want to start? Today, the impeachment started. You want to start there, or you want to go to the COVID rollout, economic?
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, we could briefly do the impeachment. I think most of us, well, at least from my point of view, I regard this as more a spectacle. To me, the wisest and the most mature way to handle this would have been a vote of censure.
Yes.
But it's pretty clear that the Democrats in the Senate have decided they're going to make this a litmus test in their own minds. I guess they feel it's a winning issue. So rather than do censure, they're going to dredge all this up and talk about the what do they call it, the insurrection. And again, the media use words that are totally inaccurate, hyperbole beyond imagination as to what was going on. And they differentiate the number of protesters who went to the Capitol and the ones who went home, and so on. So it's all been a real spectacle in more ways than one, in my view.
Yeah. But Ed, I think we expected that from the media, right? The media was always going to spin it that way, that it was all Trump's fault and things like that.
Yes.
I like reading. I read a lot of the brief from President Trump's attorneys saying how that the insurrection, if you will, was pre-planned event, so it wasn't triggered by his speech in any way. And if you read the context of his speech, there was no way, in my opinion, that he incited the violence. That's how I read it anyway. And then and I was reading another article today saying that President Trump had actually he was going to authorize 10,000 National Guard troops and was turned down. And I don't know if that was from the Washington mayor. I'm not sure where that came from.
Yeah. I think the Washington mayor originally said she didn't want to have a presence similar to when they had the Black Lives Matter demonstrations. So again, everyone is second guessing one another. But I think it's a weak case to say those words incited that. And by the way, certain words, as Oliver Wendell Holmes said, you can yell fire in the theater. That's probably a little extreme. But the fact is, your speech is protected, I guess, unless you're a conservative or a Republican, because as we saw from the way the media and the oligarchs who control Twitter and Facebook, like they're cracking down on conservatives left and right. And you would think that, any liberal thinking legal journalist, or a jurist rather, would be appalled at, censorship or whatever, but they seem to embrace it. So it's a weird time. I mean, it's like the old story of the cowboys and the Indians are just switching roles, I guess. So,
but Ed, do you really believe this impeachment is about the Capitol, or is it more that they want to put a stake in the ground that says somehow certain groups seem to be scared of Trump running again?
Yes. Yep. I think that ties in now with what I said about it. It's a spectacle and a sideshow, and the actual grounds for the impeachment are a cover for their other issue, which is the other agenda. And their other agenda is obviously what they're advancing, because as we've seen, to look at Joe Biden sitting there with a stack of executive orders, I would bet the House, my house here, that if you pulled one out and asked him what it was, he wouldn't know. So I'm not sure when he's been asked to describe his own executive orders, he stumbles all over the place. So I would really like to know who's drafting these, who's preparing them, certainly the one on the Keystone Pipeline was an utter disaster, economic disaster. And I'm sure there are many people in Pennsylvania and other states going, "Oh my God, why did we vote for this man?" Meaning Biden. So it's amazing, and to see John Kerry as his climate czar is a joke. I mean, that is in any stretch of the imagination, a man who still has a private jet that spews, carbon emissions, up the yin yang is hilarious. It's amazing. You couldn't write this stuff in a comedy
Well,
show.
we'll talk about that later, but
Yeah.
obviously he said he's too important to be delayed and sail across the ocean.
Yeah.
But
Sorry, Al. I was gonna just to touch on what Ed said about the Keystone. The thing that surprises me is just how baffled the voters were. I mean, AFL-CIO voted for Biden, supported Biden. There was no secret. Biden was pretty clear that's what he was going to do. So I almost want to say shame on them for voting the way they did and supporting him the way they did. He was, I'll give Biden credit for what credit there for President Biden what credit there is. He said he was gonna stop that. Right? He didn't make that a secret.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we'll go through those after because I
Okay.
really want to go into detail. Now, this whole impeachment, does it seem, it doesn't seem serious to me. I mean, the House did it in what, 38 microseconds? It's like, okay, let's talk about it. We've talked long enough. We're impeaching them. The Senate, I mean, you're looking at the Republicans saying DOA. We're keeping an
Yeah.
open mind, but I'm voting no. Well, how can you have an open mind if you're voting no? And
I
then
think, yeah.
let me just say, the whole idea of I'm going to impeach you. No, I'm sorry, you're not in office anymore. So I mean, the censure thing, I could more feel like that was an appropriate move.
Yep.
But do you really think this is serious?
No, not really. But there's an agenda on both sides, I'd say. And if we go to the whole point of the impeachment, if we're talking about incendiary words, let's just go back and see what Maxine Waters has said in the last years when she basically said, go find Trump supporters and get in their face wherever they are, get in their face. And Iman from Minnesota or AOC from New York, they continually use incendiary words and code words. They're always using the term racist card, but they seem to play that very well themselves. So I mean, I think the problem today in politics is that there's no incentive to be a moderate person. You raise money from your supporters by being an extremist or an extreme person, and that's too bad because no one is helped by that, and that's why I think this impeachment thing is a perfect example. It's an extreme gesture. Rather than do the censure and say you had a chance to not send them over there, and just to go back to something that you had said, I think it's pretty clear that there was a small minority of those people, of those quote protesters, who were headed to the Capitol no matter what. And they've started to do an analysis of them, excuse me, and a number of them are really sort of far right people, yes, but they're also people who don't even vote. They're not even committed in the political process. They've gone over some of the people have been arrested. They're not even registered voters. So you really have to wonder what their game was or whatever. Were they latching on to Trump's words? Were they using this as an excuse to go in? Obviously, I mean, Congress is not very popular. Nancy Pelosi is not very popular, but to occupy her office and occupy the building, or try to occupy it is I mean, the irony of congressmen and senators running in fear and whatever. I think a lot of people would get a chuckle out of because we know that most of them are incredibly wealthy people, and whether they've enriched themselves while they've been in office or whatever, they're hardly the people who represent the people anymore. That's the irony of it.
Look at how scared people like AOAC LMNOP was. She was in the next building.
And she's trying to pretend she was in the Capitol building.
Well,
Yep.
she said she was scared of being overrun, and she was in a different building. I mean, that's got to be very scary if you're so scared you're hiding in a different building.
I know that where the House office buildings are, and they're not close to the Capitol. The Senate has, more power, so their buildings are located a little, over on the Senate side. The buildings are a little closer, but the Rayburn office building or whatever is
Well, no,
tight.
it would only take you 10 minutes of hustle to get over there.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not defending what any of the congressmen and the senators did. Let's be honest. I think the debate is whether President Trump incited it or not.
Yes.
What the congressmen did and the senators did. God bless them. I don't know what I would have done in that situation. You have all these angry people. They meant business, right? But the question is, did President Trump incite that? I don't believe he did. I mean, not from
No.
the transcript, not the transcript that I read, not what, not leading up all the evidence up into that day, and not what I read. Again, you're reading through what the media put, right?
But Jeff, realistically, if somebody said he did not do enough to try and stop it, that would seem reasonable. I mean, you get censored for that.
Yeah, but they didn't say that. They didn't say that.
Right,
Yeah.
but I was saying, if they came out and said, you didn't do enough, you should have done more to try and stop it, I don't know that I could argue against that.
I don't think the Democrats wanted to even make that argument because it's a losing argument for them. And I think to contribute to what Jeff said, and for many of those people, his words were irrelevant because they were already there to do the things they wanted to do, no matter what he said. If he had just went back to the White House, it's whatever. So
let me put you both on the spot. The people who did break into the Capitol and damage, should they go to jail?
Full extent of the law, in my opinion.
Okay, so if that's the case, then how is it different from last week on the West Coast, torching buildings and attacking stores? I haven't heard one person tracked down there.
I agree with you 100%.
No, and I haven't seen.
There's no difference.
And I haven't seen the media went wild when people said, "What about the summer when people were, the policeman in St. Louis, killed while he was guarding his friend's store or whatever." I mean, and then the victims or whatever. So once the media filter out the reality, and of course we didn't hear about the West Coast violence of last week, so whatever. So I think yes, they should be brought up to the full extent of the law, but to start saying sedition and treason or whatever is to make a joke of those charges. So that to me is where we're getting into the question of being silly about things. And you're going to try 5,000 people or 2,000 people, it won't work. So you've got to figure out the people who actually did violent acts rather than just going in there. I mean, so
Ed, they broke into the Capitol. The people who broke in, I equate the same way as the people in Portland and Tacoma who broke into stores and looted.
Okay, what about the people who followed them in after they broke in? You see, that's the whole point where you get into a whole thing of I'm not arguing and defending this, but the point is the people who did this all summer didn't seem to be. In fact, you had groups like Vice President Harris's bail fund were paying bail for these people.
Well, that's what I was waiting for, to see if she was going to bail out any of the people arrested in Washington.
Right.
Yeah, we'll wait for that one.
Now, let's take a shift over. Lots being portrayed that President Biden is trying to obliterate any trace of former President Trump by doing tons of executive orders, 17 the first day, 20 now. Isn't that what Trump did when he came in? Wasn't that the same thing?
Not to that extent, no, because in fact, Biden said during the campaign that doing executive orders, he criticized Trump was governing like a dictator. Okay, I rest my case. That's why I say I'm not sure who's running the government, but I would say Joe Biden has a minor voice in it, and I'm not sure who's doing it. I'm not saying there's any clique or whatever, but his group of advisors who are around him, and he's had them around him for his chief of staff, he's had around him for 30 or 40 years. Something's going on there because all these things were prepped. Wherever they were prepped, he comes in on the first day. they knew exactly what they wanted to do. I mean, the most obvious one is the Keystone Pipeline, but probably another more damaging one is going to be on immigration.
Well, let's take them one at a time. Keystone Pipeline. If I'm an environmentalist, you cancel the Keystone Pipeline. That's going to keep people from using oil.
Yes, but it also, what the key argument for the Keystone Pipeline is, it's an environmentally friendly way to deliver oil rather than by train or by truck, which is prone to disasters and spills. So that was the argument for it. And by the way, the Canadian government, which didn't like Donald Trump, they must have got a rude awakening on the day that order was signed, because that's a catastrophe for Canada. I mean, so
yeah, but Ed, let's continue on what you said. Jeff, did you drive less?
No.
Oh, if we look at the Keystone Pipeline and you say, I'm going to cancel it, well, that oil, I don't know that it's not going to come to the U.S. to be refined. And if it comes in tractor trailers and
trains,
choo-choo trains,
Right.
isn't the carbon footprint a lot higher than a pipe?
Yeah, that's the problem, I think, with a lot of these issues, is that, everything is spun one way or the other, and I don't think everybody has the full picture as to what the impact of it is. To your point, no one's going to drive differently. We're still going to need that energy. I applaud President Biden. He wants to be green by 2050 or whatever. God bless him. But in the meantime, how do we get there? Everyday taxpayers cannot afford to not have reliable, affordable, and quotation marks, affordable energy. And to do away with the Keystone, like you said, Al, to do the Keystone and transport that oil by ship or plane or ship or boat or tractor trailer, it's just going to push the price up, and the carbon footprint's going to be exactly the same, if not higher. If not higher.
If I remember some of the words I read on Keystone, for Keystone Pipeline to be sustainable, for the tar pits to make oil, to fill it, oil has to be at about $95 to $100 a barrel to break even. Well, it's at 50.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
But going up, I think, yeah.
Well, but Ed, I'm not sure it wasn't going to close on its own.
Well, again, but when you, I know, but that might have been, a could have been argument. The fact is, it was stopped in its tracks after they spent billions on it. So figure out the loss that the companies have done investing billions of dollars already. And I think this goes to another thing about the underpinnings of the Democratic Party. It's evolved or devolved, in my view, from a party of working people to a party of elites, very wealthy groups, the power brokers and the media and whatever, the East and West Coast, and who could buy gas at $30 a gallon because they have, they're immune from financial harm, and the poor and minorities. And God bless them. A number of members of minorities, and I've met them down the Cape and I've met them all over, voted for President Trump because they were working. And to them, working is very important because they depend on a paycheck. It just isn't an extra amount of money. And
they want to have clothes.
Well, actually, yeah, but black unemployment, Latino unemployment, and unemployment in those groups was never lower than when President Trump was in. So a number of them, went out of the pattern and voted for President Trump. But you see, the elites who run the Democratic Party and control the media aren't interested in that because their lifestyles are immune, as I say, from whatever. John Kerry is an extreme example, but it's the party's changed a lot, and it's an amazing thing. But we should probably go on to another executive order or whatever, or go on to whatever. So yeah.
Oh, just one more thing. One more thing on the price of oil, per barrel. The $50 that was clearly driven by the pandemic, but it's on its way up now. It's already, you can already see it at the gas pumps. It's what, 20, 30 cents higher a gallon, and no fault of President Biden. Let's be honest. I mean, that certainly was in place. It was certainly in place before him. I don't think that he has a mechanism to bring it back. Especially killing things like the Keystone and things like that. But I think we're in for a rude awakening with the price of home heating oil, gasoline, Everything else is petroleum related.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said you ought to fix the underpinnings. Getting to sustainable energy is a worthwhile goal. Not being dependent on certain countries for our oil, which we turned around and became a net oil exporter under the last administration.
Which
But
again, the media never highlighted, and that's a major thing in the world economic power group, and especially given our competition with China, very important.
But you start thinking about that, and you say, don't shut off the oil today until you have an alternative.
Yep.
Because all you're going to do, if you really are worried about the lower income people, they pay the same $2.50 a gallon or $2.39 a gallon that the high income people pay. So if you really care about them, cutting off oil is just going to increase the burden they have.
Exactly.
I agree.
I'd much rather see us build up alternative energy and then say, well, we wouldn't have to. The market would take care of it. At one point, oil is going to be obsolete, and that's a good thing. But we got to make sure that we can still, because you still got to drive. I mean,
Right.
There's no buses or trains leaving Milford to take you to your neighbor, your family. You're still going to get in the car.
Yeah. But I guess to me that gets me is the lack of concern for those people, many of whom voted for the Democratic Party. In other words, it's, like John Kerry got up there and said, well, they'll just have to get other jobs, which is, John outdid himself on that day of being tone deaf. You can imagine the staff in the press room going, oh boy, here we go, But
people making 70 grand a year on the pipeline are told they can go build solar panels.
Again, yeah.
You got to move to China to build them.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yeah, you just can't flip the switch on this. I mean, look at Cambridge, look at Worcester. That they're talking about going geothermal.
Oh yeah.
And that's a great concept, right? Who bears the expense of changing all the equipment in the people's houses? That's it's great. It's great that you want to go green, but there's a big cost to that for the everyday homeowner and everyday taxpayer.
Yep.
But I'm ready. Yep. We can move.
Okay, now you start talking about other directives. Immigration. I am confused over what's happening.
I'm sure he is too. So, yeah. So, unfortunately, I mean, it's very clear that the prison camps that were in that the media accused President Trump of having in Mexico and in Texas are reopening. By the way, they're reopening.
But they're reopening. Steal that idea.
Yes. So
I don't give him credit for doing the cages and the separation. Wasn't that our President Biden before him that put that in?
President Obama. Yes. Yeah.
Well, he was vice president, so our current president.
Yeah.
It was in his administration that's a lot of these things. Everybody gives Trump credit for it. I don't think Trump gets the credit. He just continued it or expanded it.
Yeah. Well,
but I'm a big fan of legal immigration. I'm not a big fan of just a broad brush, change the status to let illegals come in without the proper channels. It just doesn't seem right to me for the people that are here legally to give the same rights to the people that are here illegally. I just don't think that's fair. No. I don't think it's fair to the taxpayers that are here or the people that are going through the right process to get citizenship status. I just don't think that's right.
If you look at the election results, number of counties in South Texas, there's one particular one there has never ever voted for a Republican. Okay, it's a heavily Hispanic county. A lot of people, original immigrants from Mexico. President Trump's votes in that whole area skyrocketed because people there are even opposed to illegal immigration because it affects them in bad ways. These people are passing through or whatever. But I mean, to me, the immigration issue is an issue that, it's a hot button one. But to me, things like the influence of China and the attempt to increase the minimum wage are much more fundamental to people's everyday lives, because we could talk about, how people ventured from illegal immigrants or illegal, undocumented, whatever you'd like to call them, ventured from the Mexican border to Milford, Massachusetts, for God's sakes, thousands of miles. So the pervasive effect of illegal immigration is amazing. I mean, it's millions of people. So,
But Ed, you've questioned the motivation.
yep.
Is it not just compassion that they feel bad for all of Central America and South America? That's why they
Okay.
want to let them come to the
Okay.
U.S.?
Thank you, Al. I have just learned that Mayor De Blasio has put the Brooklyn Bridge up for sale, and would you like to buy it? So it's going to be a great deal. Trust me, we'll make it a toll bridge. We'll make it a toll bridge. No, compassion. It's a cynical manipulation of things, and honestly, in many of these countries, people are fleeing drug cartels in their own country. Mexico's not the only country with drug cartels. Honduras, Guatemala, whatever. And these people are fleeing for some of them very valid reasons. And also, a number of them from Honduras had said their country was devastated by the hurricanes last year, and they want to get out. So that's those are points, but there is a compassion aspect. But no, the other is, I think, a very cynical one. Yep.
Well, I mean, when you think about some of the motivation, most of the DARPA kids are Democrats. If you give them a vote, I mean, if you took 10 million people, waved the magic wand, and made them all American citizens, do you
Yep.
think it'd be an even split?
No.
So I don't doubt that, it's a little self-serving.
Yep. The Democrats have a ground plan now to turn Texas blue, and a key part of turning Texas blue is to bring immigrants in and make sure that they're get the right to vote. So it's very, very clear. They've said this, and you connect the dots, which the media will never do. It's pretty clear what this is all about. But it devalues the whole idea of legal immigration, and it devalues the whole idea of what we should be having is visas and immigration based also on brain power. That there's brain power in the rest parts of the world that want to come here. It's pretty clear when you looked at a lot of the doctors interviewed when we're talking about the COVID thing, the number of doctors from foreign countries who are brilliant, experts in COVID, in research and investigation and science. And it's amazing. It's a good thing they were attracted to come to the country because we're better for it. But it's brain power. It's amazing. Yep.
Well, I mean, I've always felt that the United States, we're the biggest thieves of intellect in the world. We invite a lot of foreign kids to come to our universities. They're usually the brightest of their country, and we get to keep 25% of them.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about the Chinese aspect of that, but we could talk about that a little again in a minute. There seems to be something else going on there, but yeah.
But realistically, having people come in that are selected for their talents has done well by us. We've done well by it.
Well, look at
open the floodgates.
But also look at immigration through the world. I mean, go back and Jeff and my grandparents, your parents or whatever, the countries they came from, they were fleeing economic situations, but they came over, and the mixture of all the different populations and ethnicities and cultures has made the country a greater place. So, and now we're looking at, in a sense, with the knowledge is power, we're looking to lure, super achievers from other countries over as well. So,
and I have a sensitivity towards the dreamers, the kids. I mean, I call myself Portuguese. I wouldn't know how to live in Portugal.
Yeah.
I was born, raised, and lived in Milford. My mother, who came from Portugal, she was in Milford for 78 years. Now, she spent her first 16 years in Portugal, but she could never go back and live there
No,
without
no.
dramatically altering her lifestyle.
Now,
Well,
my only
yeah.
concern, with the immigration, all the things we're talking about is true. It's true. I'm not in favor of President Biden eliminating the restrictions on these terrorist states. I think that was a pretty quick brush to say, open up the immigration back to, Yemen and to Syria and to all these. I'm not maybe I'm just ignorant to the fact, but to me, all the things I read is, I think those people need to be screened before they come in,
No
and
question.
follow proper channels.
No
But you
question.
can't screen them, Jeff, because places like Yemen, Syria, the hot spots where there's wars, there's no records.
Yeah.
And
So
and
go ahead, Ed.
and then the ones they probably want to send over for terrorist reasons would have immaculate records because they're crafted and prepared. I mean, that's the whole thing today, that the two states in the world, the two countries in the world that are our biggest threat are Iran and China. And to hear the media talk about Russia as a threat is a joke, because Putin sounds impressive, but the fact is, I think we talked about this in the show, the states of California, Texas, and New York have larger economies than the country of Russia. And that's a fact. So when people start talking about the threat from Russia, let's talk about the threat from Iran and the real dangerous threat from China, because
And North
China,
Korea.
yeah. But I'm just saying, as far as
Yeah.
physically with the things, but China's doing an all-out press in intellectual property theft, in importing certain things in this country that aren't good. And now there are stories that the Chinese government is in cahoots with the cartels in Mexico. So this reporting is being done right now. It can fit considerable danger to people. It's really a scary thing.
But Ed, strategically, if I looked at all these countries, North Korea scares me, but on a tactical level,
Yes.
right? Iran on a tactical level. If they build a nuke and launch it, and they launched it against the US, I don't know that we would sit back and say, you shouldn't have done that. That's really mean.
No, they're more. It's a regional threat that they are over. We're not going Iran versus the United States. We're talking about Iran's power to disrupt and overthrow countries like Yemen and whatever in the area. That's the key thing, because oil is an important thing for Europe and whatever. North Korea is obviously more isolated, but the granddaddy or grandmommy of them all is, of course, China. So
Yeah, and see, strategically, China scares me more because they're doing an all-out push to become the number one economic force in the world.
yeah. And they're also doing, beside doing that, they're also doing, I think they're doing things to undermine our country. And we just go right to the whole COVID thing, and how that was handled, and how they handled it in their own country, and how they didn't handle it in other countries. So they are a great deal of responsibility for that, and that's in my book. So
Well, the only thing is, as I look at Chinese operations, the Belt and Road Initiative, where they went to these countries and loaned them money, more money than they could ever pay back, because they just wanted to be nice. Well, all of a sudden, when they needed a port in a couple of these countries, they called in their loans.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden, the countries are sitting there saying, ooh, this is not the United States where they forgive our loans. We got to pay them.
Yeah, I think just beyond that, it's also an all-out. You talk about countries in the world, but I believe they have an all-out strategy to undermine our country in its foreign policies and its domestic policies. And if the president, the current president, the past president knew what that was about. If this current president chooses to ignore it, it's a perilous cost, given the investigation into Hunter Biden, his son, and his connections to China, and Biden's brother's connections to China. So this is a very, very dangerous time, and this could blow up in everyone's face. So,
well, the one thing that I'm happy about I was very disappointed when Trump won that so many people refused to call him their president. At least now I'm hearing President Biden. I mean, at the end of the day, I was not an Obama supporter. But once he became our president, God, I wanted him to win.
Well,
I
Al,
didn't want
yeah, Trump derangement syndrome, as we call it, wasn't just against President Trump. The media and the elites also have a real problem with dealing with people who supported President Trump and people who support President Trump. There was an article in yesterday's paper, and I said this couldn't be true, written in the Los Angeles Times, an opinion piece by a woman who lived in a very wealthy area of California, and her Trumpist neighbors, that's what she called them.
Oh, the one that plowed
the Trumpist neighbors plowed her driveway as a favor without asking her, and she did a expose of them, likening them to Nazi sympathizers, Hezbollah sympathizers, and whatever else, and that she was disturbed that they actually did that because it gave her a problem, and she couldn't acknowledge the kind act that they did, and it just shows you the level of. And imagine this is published in the Los Angeles Times. It just shows you the level of goofiness that some of these people have, because I guess they're entitled to their view, but we're not entitled to our point of view. I guess that's because is the underlying thing there that they know better than we do? Because that seems to be the trend in a lot of the media, that they, like the Chris Cuomo's of the world, whatever, and his brother Andrew, that they know better than we do, and it's disturbing.
But I think it put the neighbor in a difficult situation. I hate Jeff because he's a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
God dang it. Now I got to say thank you to him.
I doubt she said thank you, because you could just see, I guess someone said someone called and said you should dump the snow back in the driveway. So.
Yeah, I know. If I had read that, the next snowstorm, I'd turn the snowblower the other way. But I guess I'm just not as nice as them. But, it just kills me that I have to dislike you because you support a party.
Yeah.
And then you can't be human and do something nice for me because you'll make me uncomfortable.
And it's your fault that you did it. Yeah. And then
you must have an ulterior motive.
Then she dredges up the Nazis and dredges up Hezbollah and she was likening her neighbors to that. So good luck.
Let's transition.
Yeah, let's
there are people who lost everything to the Nazis, and I can't imagine they really believe it's equivalent to somebody cleaning
No, but
your
this
snow.
is this, again, this privileged person. I think a good topic to go to would be the minimum wage, because that's going to affect everyone.
Well, let's take it one step up above that and then go to minimum wage. The economy. Now, taxes, I think it was President Biden who said, I will not raise taxes on anybody making less than 400 grand a year.
Okay.
So that means 90% or more, 80% make 100. So 85% of people don't have to worry about their taxes going up.
Yeah.
Maybe
I should offer the Brooklyn Bridge to him then, because that's not going to happen. So
then I start hearing how they want to tax your savings account. I mean, a nice conservative paper like the New York Times ran an article that talked about a proposal where they would take 2% of your savings.
Good God.
Right off the top. So your IRA and all. AOA-CLMNOP, I think, was leading this. And I sat there and said, now, wait a minute. Is that only for people making $400,000 a year that they're going to touch their savings? How is it? I don't see the continuity of the claim.
No, and then there's the other issue, which has always been on the burner for the Democrats, is in states and in the feds, is to tax people for the miles they drive. That's in some of the left coast states, Oregon, California, Washington. It's a dominant theory of theirs to penalize people or tax them. I guess it's the privilege of paying taxes for driving to work or whatever. So that's another thing. So you see where all this is going. I mean, they need money, and these programs, all these programs, the expansion of Obamacare and all these things cost money. And where's the money going to come from? We can't borrow from China anymore. So they're gonna have to raise taxes. So
Yeah, but
It's a good transition though, Alpha. You're talking about the economy as a whole for the minimum wage, because all the things I'm reading is that the minimum wage, if it is enacted, which I don't think it will be at 15 anyway, but if it is enacted, it's going to raise the income level for, I forget how many million of people, except it's going to put, I think I read 1.4 million people out of work. It's
Yep.
gonna push the unemployment up by 1.4 million. And so the net gain for the economy is not a net gain, because now the unemployment roll's going up. Now all the benefits paid to unemployment is going to hit anything against it. Plus trades and goods that are affected by the $15 minimum wage is going to cost a regular consumer more money. The employers are not going to hire as many people because they can't afford it. All the economists that I read, for President Biden to say that it's great for the economy and everybody agrees, that's not what I read. I read like almost half the economists say it's not a good thing for the economy.
Al,
but
the current federal minimum wage is under $8 an hour.
no,
Now,
7
shame
an
on
hour.
Congress for never raising it, and it's been a decade or more that they bothered on it. Now, obviously, the federal minimum wage doesn't affect a lot of people, but it's a marker. I mean, a lot of state governments have more, but what do you do with states down south or out west where, maybe the minimum wage there might be $9 an hour or 10 or 8.50? You're going to go in one swoop to 15. I mean, it's insanity to think that you can go up, $6 an hour in an exec and in an act. It should be, if your goal is to do that, it should be staggered over a 5 or 7 year period. That's the way
But
it
isn't
is
it
to me.
normally? I mean, when I see companies, large companies saying they're going to move to $15 an hour over the next 4 years, when I go get my coffee. Yes, and I'm privileged. I can buy a cup of coffee, and I'm not going to feel guilty that I can go buy a cup of coffee.
Well,
I see a note in the Dunkin' Donuts window, help wanted, starting at $12.50.
yeah.
So $12.50 today isn't a great amount of money, but isn't it close to 15 in 2 or 3 years?
But when you say large companies are, but the point is the lifeblood of America is small business, and to put that in there, it'll be like saying to imagine, and this is going to apply to restaurants that are decimated over the COVID thing. They're tipped employees. It's crazy. The mom and pop stores all over the country that fuel the economy. The small businesses that have less than 50 people working for them. This is goofy. I mean, it should be a goal, but it should be a staggered goal over a certain number of years. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and I see it really impacting the younger people trying to work, because they're just not going to afford it. They're just not going to afford it, and they're going to have to give it to more experienced folks. I think I don't see the job opportunities going to exist at that much money. It's just going to be too expensive for these small businesses to run.
Well, I think what ends up happening is you hire fewer people and you add more hours to the ones you have. Because if you're hiring somebody full time, well, you're adding 20 grand a year to their salary just in benefits. So if I got to make up for it somewhere, I just won't hire as many people. I'll use the people I have.
Totally agree. I totally agree. That's where it's going to come.
It's just intuitively a bad idea. You could say briefly, "Oh, it's a great goal," but when you look at the details of the implementation or the effects, it would hurt the very people that they're trying to help. I would say so.
Well, again, it's one of those concepts. Free college, free medical, free. You remember Margaret Thatcher talking about how socialism was the best form of government she ever saw until you run out of other people's money?
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to. I cannot argue with AOC about it would be wonderful to have free school for everybody.
Oh, good grief.
It
Yeah.
would be wonderful to have free medical for everybody. If people don't want to work, they should still make 30 grand, $15 an hour. That'd be wonderful.
Really? Well, the net
But
effect on the net effect on the culture and everything might not be very good. And to quote her on anything is silly. Not no, you're not being silly, but she comes out with things that the media adopt, and it's like I would be very embarrassed if I were Boston University and to realize they gave her a degree. I'm sorry.
but Ed,
Let's cut to the chase.
realistically, it's like asking somebody, "Do you love your mother?" Of course you do.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, stop it. You're not going to say no, but is it practical? Like world peace. Who would argue against world peace? I don't know how to make it happen.
Right.
Look at another one. This idea of forgiving all college debt or
Oh,
at least 50 grand of college debt.
so that cuts to the core of the issue with the Democratic Party today. The the quote, and I'm not saying you have to be an elite person to go to college, but there are many people who never even had the opportunity to go to college because of life forces and whatever. A number of minorities have never had the opportunity to go to college. So you're going in one swoop, you're going to give an entitled group, again, who are 85% Democrat, loan forgiveness for debt that they amassed. What kind of message is that? Why don't we give $50,000 to every person of that certain age? I mean, if someone wants to forgive their debt, fine. But again, it's one of these ideas that it shows where they're coming from as far as rewarding their supporters. And to me, it's first of all, it's utterly discriminatory and it's elitist and it's almost like an idea that they would accuse a Republican of having, because in the old days it used to be the party of the rich or whatever. Now we're talking about the party of the the hipster college student. Let's just put it that way. The same people who are at Google censoring conservative Twitter quotes and whatever. That's the way I look at it. So
Walk me there. The big social media companies have said, you can't sue me because I can't control the context of what coming out of my company.
yeah, unless you're a
But
conservative,
now,
yeah.
but now all of a sudden, okay, we don't like Donald Trump, so we're going to cut him off totally. We don't like some of the conservatives, we're going to cut them off. Are they also cutting off the crazy liberals? I mean, let's face it, we have some really nut cases on the right and some really nut cases on the left.
Yep.
It's just the fact of life. Both sides, I don't know if one scares me more than the other, but both sides scare me. But I don't hear the left being cut off very often.
No.
No, I agree.
And it's the same thing that Senator Hawley pointed, that the president of Iran is free to call every day, vile anti-Semitic quotes and for the death of Israel and everything else. And it's. I mean, imagine what's his name, and I always call him Ping Ping in North Korea. Does he have a Twitter account? I'm sure they wouldn't censor him, would they? I mean, come on, it just shows you that. I guess I was saying this to someone the other day. I think we're seeing the fruition of 30 or 40 years of colleges and universities have transformed from places of learning to a lot of places of indoctrination. And you see it that conservatives aren't allowed on campuses, conservative speakers aren't allowed on campus. Certainly, a conservative professor who said he was conservative would never be hired. I mean, that's unless you're in the sciences or whatever. But these people have gone through now 40 years. A number of these people now are in key positions in Google, in industry, in all sorts of finance and whatever. And to me, the lessons they learned or didn't learn in school are very telling. And I think we see it, because you're not going to tell me that the people who supposedly monitor Google and Facebook are not leftist. They are beyond leftist, and they have certain views. And if you don't go along with them, I mean, if you're a climate change denier or whatever else, you're in trouble with them. That's the way it is, and unfortunately.
But Ed, we did a show a little while ago with your brethren, the liberal view, and we did it on socialism
Ah,
because all we hear about is how wonderful socialism is. And they had great arguments how, you could tax everybody, you could do this, and life would be better. And when I asked one basic question, I couldn't get agreement. Would you give up living in Milford to go live in, let's see, socialism, Venezuela,
yep.
Cuba? You know, uh, Nobody would admit that they'd rather live somewhere else that's socialist than live in Milford.
Yep.
Right.
Isn't that kind of like the bottom line about
And
if
what?
you really
Yeah.
believe another government is better and wonderful, why wouldn't you want to be there?
Well, it's like the people who spout Palestinian rights and so on, and rights of some of these governments in the Middle East, when in reality, if any of them who were saying that went over there and made any kind of statement that was the government didn't like, they'd be in big trouble or worse. And so, obviously, the fact is we're allowed. We're on your show. They're on your show. Free speech is an important thing, and many countries don't honor it, and that's why I say I think we're looking at the powerful people within the media and whatever who are trying to silence freedom, and I think that's a very scary thing because I would like to see, and we would do a show again in a month, whether the media has figured out, to ask President Biden's press secretary a question that wasn't about what is, basically the equivalent of, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, and that's, as I say, it's a weird thing because you've seen the transformation of what's happened, I think, and it's frightening because these people are against freedom.
But is Biden disappointing the progressives in your mind? I mean,
Well,
we
gee,
still have Elizabeth Warren, right? I mean, everybody thought she'd be handpicked to go into this new administration. He took
yeah, but he was
Bernie.
worried. He was worried about control of the Senate, and he was right about that. So the Senate's, 50-50. So you really, I mean, even in Massachusetts, they'd pick a Democrat. But again and again, you wonder what the interview and among his advisors, because I think he's very influenced or controlled by his advisors, and that's a good thing. If President Trump had advisors of that level and he listened to them, he might still be president. But that's not the case. So I don't. If he's disappointing to progressives, boy, that's pretty scary because how much further can you go to the left than he's gone under the guise of not going to the left? Because he's an innocuous sounding person. I think I'd say, So
What do you think, Jeff?
I think he's trying to play middle of the road as he has always done his entire career. What sounds good? What sounds good? Who wants to hear what they want to hear? And he just plays right to it. That's how to me, that's how I've always seen him. You ask him a question: are you for this? Are you against it? Depends on the flavor of the day. Depends on the crowd in the room, and that's the way he answers. Whether he believes it or not, that's just how he answers. He doesn't. He just placates no matter to who he's talking to, my opinion. So
Now, last topic. We got a couple minutes we can talk about. Trump took some pretty strong stands against Iran, against NATO, paying for all of NATO, against paying for an extra share of the UN. I mean, do you think it's going to be all turned back?
all
yes,
yes.
yes, and then some.
His pick for liaison to Iran, I guess, is a real disappointing one from our point of view. A guy who dealt with them before, a friend of Kerry's, I guess, who was totally manipulated by them. So, how much money did they give them in pallets, Obama? 60 billion or whatever. I know it was. Oh boy, I know it was supposedly their money, but you know where that money's gone. It hasn't gone to charities in Iran, and so no, I would say yeah. He's going to roll back with gusto, and as Jeff said, more. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but do we have the money to roll back that kind of tide?
Well,
I mean,
Yep.
personally, I got a problem with paying for 2/3 of NATO and not having enough money to take care of people in America.
yeah.
I agree.
Well, I think a lot of Biden's policies are basically directed at undoing what Trump did and not analyzing them whether they were good or not. Because in the mind of his advisors and whatever, Trump did nothing good. So how can you keep anything around like that? So the America First thing. Now it's he's reversed. He's made a point of doing this all along. Whether you want to call this Obama light or not, I think we're probably not giving him enough credit. But because I think honestly, from some of these policies I've seen, they're Obama and more, and that's scary. So
Yeah, and I think Ed's right on the money. It's less that he understands what the issue is as it is anti-Trump. I mean, World Health Organization, Paris Climate Accord, we're going to be back in both feet, and I think it's primarily just because President Trump was the other way. My opinion. That's how I see it.
And a lot of these things, I like the idea of helping the climate, but I want China and other leading countries to take their fair share of it.
Right.
exactly.
I mean, I'd be great if I was China and you said you're going to cripple your industry to help me. Go ahead.
Have at it.
So,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens, and we'll get back together in 90 days and
Yep.
see
Well,
how the
hopefully
first,
sooner than that. Yep.
even sooner. Okay, guys, good night. And to everybody that watches, to our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better day. And let's just hope our president is successful in ways that help the whole country.
Yeah.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Al.
Good night, Al.
Not too long since I've been home.